I'm trying to get as vocal a sound on the instrument as I can. I'm as much, if not more, influenced by vocalists than I am saxophone players. There's a melodic flow to it, and I think that's something we forget. We think, oh, we got all this technique, but what are you doing with it? You know, like kind of what's the point of the technique if you're not reaching somebody with your melody?
Jeff Coffin, man, what a pleasure.
Thank you, Jay.
To
Nice
be
to
with
see
you, and I get to hear you play throughout the Gen Conference. We're at the Gen Conference in Atlanta, 2025.
Snowy Atlanta.
Snowy Atlanta.
Snowmageddon.
Yeah, it's crazy, that snow, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, did it mess you up at all? Like, did it mess any plans up?
No.
Good. I'm waiting for a package, but FedEx didn't deliver yesterday.
Okay.
And now I'm worried that I can deliver it Saturday, and I'm leaving tomorrow. So
Yeah.
snow. We're not prepared for snow in Atlanta.
No, not so much.
Man, you sounded great every time I heard you. You know, whether it's playing tenor or soprano, flute.
Thank you.
You're just crushing it on everything. Everything. So great. And the other day I was in the hall. There was like one of these student groups, these university groups playing, great group. And I went out into the hallway and I was talking to somebody, and then I hear the saxophone, and everybody in the building like turned their head, you know what I mean? We weren't even in the room, everybody turned their head. And I was talking to, I forget the name of the cat I was talking to, but he's like, oh, that's Jeff. And I poked my head, and there you were, and then you just started like destroying it.
That's funny.
And wow. So that's impressive. And you know what, that happened again just this morning. I'm at the Jody Jazz booth, and whatever's going on, everybody's doing something. And there's this constant noise in there. Constant just noise of 100 people playing instruments at the same time, and a perpetual jam session going on right next to us. And then all of a sudden I hear this soprano tone just like clear out all of the other notes, just come straight through. And I'm like, oh, that's obviously Jeff.
Yeah, you're gonna make me blush, man.
No, but this is really important to point out for anybody who's playing any wind instrument or anything with a sound. Like, that is the ultimate when you can, and you remember it as a musician, as a listener. You remember these moments when you hear somebody. I remember hearing Paquito de Rivera do that once at a IHE conference. Huge, these conference hall rooms are not really good. He gets up there and with the clarinet, no mic, and just cuts over the whole band. And
That's why he's Paquito.
Yeah. And I'll never forget that. Like, wow, I'm like in the back,
Well, I think you feel sound in your body. And our skin is the largest organ. So when you think about things like goosebumps, like where do they come from? It's not just here. It's very much not just here. And the ear canal is small, right? So the sound that's going in there, yes, there's some, but I get goosebumps, the back of my head, down my arms, sometimes even down my legs, it's like this full body experience of listening. And I think that, the way that vibration affects our body, the way that sound affects our body, there are those moments, man. We've all had them.
Yeah.
We've all had them. I'll go into a clinic sometimes and we'll be talking about things, and I'll say, how many of you have ever had goosebumps listening to music? The first time I asked a question, I'll never forget this. I had an expectation. I thought probably 60 to 70%. Every hand went up, and I got goosebumps.
Yeah. I'm getting goosebumps just like.
I know. Every time I talk about it, I get them, right? And so there's something about this. There's something about, the way sound affects us and the endorphins that get released. And there are just certain sounds you hear and you're like, wow, that's something. So thank you for that. I mean, I'm trying to get as vocal a sound on the instrument as I can. I'm as much, if not more, influenced by vocalists than I am saxophone players. And the saxophone players I'm influenced by, to me, sound like vocalists for the most part,
I touched on this with Kirk.
Yeah.
Yesterday, because he is a great example of that.
Absolutely, he's one of the greatest examples of that.
And as you say, our favorite saxophone players, maybe it's because they do sound like vocalists and they're thinking like vocalists.
Well, there's melody. Like, I don't think that you can sing really out.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like you can have some really interesting intervallic stuff. You know, you can like the throat singers singing 3 notes at a time. Inuit singing, what Bobby McFerrin does, what Jacob Collier does, etc. But there's a melodic flow to it. And I think that's something we forget. We think, oh, we got all this technique, but what are you doing with it? You know, like kind of what's the point of the technique if you're not reaching somebody with your melody? And
Sound.
and your sound, yeah. I mean, sound is all of it. I had dinner with Branford the other night in New Orleans. My wife and I were down there over New Year's during all that craziness. And but it was beautiful to be there because we have such great friends and to support the community after going through something like that. But I was hanging out with Charlie Gabriel, who's 92 years old, brilliant saxophone player. And his sound, man, I mean, it's like you hear it and it just melts your heart. It's so beautiful, man. And we were talking with Branford about Charlie because, of course, he knows him. And we were talking about that. We were talking about sound and tone. And Branford was telling me a story of when he was playing with Roy Haynes. And Roy said, man, he said, I really wish you had been able to hear Bird. And Branford was like, yeah, man, but you played with Train also. And he said, yeah, but Bird. He said, there's never been a sound like that. And so I think the sound reflects the person also. Like when you hear Sonny Rollins, the sound reflects his voice also, the phrasing of the voice, the timbre. So I think it's a reflection of the person, of the experiences, of the intention. And Branford's like that too, man. You hear him and you're like, oh, that's Branford, no question. No question. And you hear the funny, you hear you know, Branford's very opinionated, but he's opinionated because he's done the work. You know, he has an opinion based on, like, you know, I've researched this, so I have an opinion on it. And he's never been like, my opinion should be your opinion. Right. But people sometimes misread that, right? And so even the stuff that he says, like, which I think is brilliant, and I find I agree with pretty much all of it, that I think it gets misconstrued sometimes because people are like, oh, well, that's not what people normally say. He's like, yeah, but you asked me my opinion. And I feel that way too. Like if somebody asks me, I'm kind of obligated to tell them how I feel. And it's okay if they don't agree with it, because then what ends up happening is that it opens a possibility for a dialogue. Yeah. And when you have a dialogue, then you're communicating, which is just like music, you know? And you may not play like somebody else, right? But you get in there and you start working some stuff out, you can immediately have an opportunity for a dialogue.
There's no reason why we can't have differences of opinion.
Of course.
Yet still communicate.
Of course.
Like we do in music all
Right.
the time. This is another perhaps really important lesson we can learn.
Yeah, it's like a
from
life
music.
lesson. Yeah.
And yeah, unpopular opinions, you know, makes things spicy and interesting sometimes, rather than everyone just agreeing on the same.
Well, I think
stuff.
for a lot of people, like anyone else's opinion is an unpopular opinion these days.
Yeah.
You know, which is very myopic. And that's why, you know, I love playing music so much, because it's like everybody's opinion matters, and it's all valid.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't mean that everybody you play with, you're going to have a magical experience. But if you're open to the way that someone else hears music, like take Brad Good, for example, a trumpet player. I've never heard anybody play trumpet like him, ever. You know, and I love it. I mean, I'm sure there's people that are like, well, it's not totally my thing, which I can't understand at all, because it's genius, right? And so you hear people that are exploring other corners of music and sound and tonality and intonation. I love talking about that stuff. And I love coming to a conference where there are people that can really actively speak to those things And we were hanging out last night talking about some of this stuff too, and gets me thinking about things. It reminds me of certain things that I already know, and I think that we need those reminders sometimes.
Yeah, it's great being in this sort of environment where there's so many different individuals, so many great musicians, and the conversations that come up and the things that get us thinking. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fantastic. Now, you had just mentioned to me earlier that how much you love teaching and how like the hundreds of clinics you have done. And that got me thinking, wow, I've never been to one of your clinics, unfortunately. And I wonder, do you have like set different subjects that you cover depending on the situation? Do you go in there with sometimes with a concept and then it ends up going in a different direction? Has that, I'm sure it has evolved over time.
Absolutely.
And maybe you could quickly share with us, your best of your highlight, like the stuff that you've this is what I've worked with student groups and I feel like this is the stuff that really resonates the best.
Sure, of course. So when I first started doing clinics, I was doing listening clinics. And I would have on my computer, I would start with Coleman Hawkins, Body and Soul, Lester Young, Indiana, Ben Webster, Cottontail. Then I would go to Bird, Donnelly, and I would play Indiana right before that, actually. So I would be like, by the way, this is the same tune, same chord changes. And then from Bird, I would go to Sonny, St. Thomas, talking about the influence of like global music on him as well, like the cultural aspect of things. And then we would get to 1959, which was the year that Kinda Blue, Mingus's Bill Evans Trio,
Shape of Jazz to Come.
Shape of Jazz to Come, Giant Steps,
And Time Out.
and Time Out. That's exactly right. Yeah, those are the ones. And so that was the year that the jazz mirror got shattered, and we're still dealing with all those reflections. So I would play Giant Steps because it's all saxophone centric, listening, and then I would play Peace by Ornette. Which is gorgeous, beautiful melody, man, right? And to make a point that a lot of people thought Ornette was really out, right? But I listen to this melody, man. One of the great melody writers of all time, in my opinion. And so that would be the listening class, like saying, okay, I'm taking you through from here to here. And everything we're dealing with today is encapsulated in that, in my opinion.
Right.
And there's offshoots, of course, but these to me were the groundbreakers all the way through. And from there, it evolved into talking about fundamentals. At the IAJE conference, way back, the last one, which was in Toronto, I had been asked to, I had submitted to do a listening clinic, right? This was kind of a little crossroads for me. They said, hey, we've already got someone doing a listening clinic. Could you do something on pedagogy? I said, yeah. And I'm thinking, oh, dear God, that's the worst thing ever for me, is talking about pedagogy with saxophone players.
Okay.
And
why is that?
oh, it's dry, it's boring.
It's
It's,
not-
it's like, oh, like this intellectual conversation about chord scale relationships. I'm like, God, just get away from that. Just play music, like learn that stuff. But can't we talk about other things that are important, right? So I knew this about 9 months ahead of time that I was going to be doing a talk. I'm staying with some friends in Toronto. It's literally the day of the conference, and I have nothing. I'm not kidding. I have nothing prepared.
The day of.
The day of.
What time is the?
It's in the afternoon, and this is the morning,
It's the morning.
right? And I'm racking my brain, man. And so John Whitman from Yamaha had said, people can remember 3 diamond points, right? And he said, so when you go in, like, and you're talking about something, think about 3 points you want to make, because that's what they're going to take away. And so I started thinking about books like The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, this, that, the other thing, right? And so I thought, okay, if they can remember 3, maybe they can remember 5, because 5 is on one hand, right? And so I'm literally in the shower getting ready to go. And I'm thinking about all the students I had worked with up until that point. What do they need? Like, what is it that they are lacking in what they're working on? And of course, it's fundamentals. So I came up with what I call the Big 5. And at the top of that is listening, right? So it included the thing I had already been working on. Tone and dynamics is second. Then the other 3 can come in any order: articulation, rhythm and time, and harmony, right? Harmony being the relationship between sounds. Rhythm and time being combined, because you can't have one without the other, right? And tone and dynamics, the same thing. Articulation, that's also about time and rhythm. So they're all connected. It's like 5 islands, but if you take away the water, they're connected underneath, right? And so
All this in the shower.
all this in the shower, right? And so it came to me. I was like, that's what I'm going to talk about. And so I've done so many clinics on fundamentals and the Big 5, and from that in turn, I'll go and I'll talk about improvisation and how to start improvisation. I did an app a number of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years now, called Connecting the Dots, and it's on the Apple platform, and basically it's starting with one note, the root. I go just root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th of one chord, and I'll play a phrase, ba, be, da, da. Student plays ba, ba, da. I play ba, 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 da, ba, ba, da. Then we do a different rhythm for 4 bars. So there's 6 rhythms over the root, same 6 rhythms over the 3rd, 5th, 7th. Then I add a note. By the end of the chapter, if you will, you're using all 4 notes, right? You understand how to utilize them in a way, starting on the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. So you're inverting the chord at the same time. And I do this in all 12 keys. I played every exercise, right, through one key, and then digitally in all the other keys. And then there's 2 chords doing the same thing, with voice leading from the last note to the closest note of the next chord. And then I do it through the blues. And so understanding the arpeggiations, what I call the spine, the backbone of the chord, and how to connect those arpeggios, that's playing the changes. That's literally playing the changes. You can't get any more playing the changes than if you're using the chord tones, right? And then once you have an understanding of that, then you can start to add in a half step underneath this, that, or the other thing.
Right.
So I try to show students is like, even again, just using one chord. Because if I'm at a school somewhere, doing a big band thing or whatever, I'll try to have kind of a modal section on one tune that I can get the whole band to play, right? And what I'll normally do is I'll do this call and response, which is based off some other experiences I've had, also in New Orleans, this call and response, and I'll show them exactly what I'm trying to get them to do. I'll play, and then they imitate. I'll play again, and they'll imitate. And then I'll say, okay, pick any 2 notes, or pick any other note of the chord you want to play, because it's going to sound a chord. So immediately it sounds good to them. And they're like, oh, I can do this, right? It's not rocket science. Right. But I have to also show them where the chords come from. So I'll put a C major scale on the board. And I'll show them, I'll go through the different modes and show them that there's 7 chords for each major scale. So if you want to know why we have to learn our major scales, this is why, because there's 7 chords in each of them for all 12 keys. So kind of unlocking any kind of mystery with that. And in the over 325 clinics I've done, there's only been 2 students ever that the night of the concert, they said, I can't take a solo tonight. I said, okay. It was just too much for them, too much emotion. And, but I've had incredible experiences with students, because you take the mystery out, you give them something that they can work on,
right,
that they will sound good at, right? And even if they're just playing some arpeggiations, right? Even if they're doing something with whatever, and like the simplicity of it can get complex in the rhythm of it. Like if you listen to African music, there's usually 2 chords going on. Might be 1 and 4, might be 1 and 5. The complexity of what's going on rhythmically is extraordinary, right? So if you take that into improvisation also, take 1 chord, mix it up, like invert the chord. If it's let's say it's an E flat 7 chord, right? So the lowest note on the saxophone of that E flat 7 is the B flat. So you go B flat, D flat, E flat, G, etc., all the way up. So that's in what's called second inversion, right? And so understanding where these notes sit on the horn in these different inversions then gives you flexibility all the way throughout the instrument. And so I'll have students, I'll say, play me a solo only using the chord tones. And suddenly it sounds beautiful, right? It's like, it's kind of an epiphany for them because they want to talk about chord scale relationships. I'm like, show me any musician that you like that's playing scales for their improvisation.
Find that in a recording.
Yeah, and you won't find it. Like people are exploring some of that stuff. Coltrane in his Sheets of Sound was exploring some of that stuff, but it was also melody.
And that came long after.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, I'm a melody guy. That's what I'm looking for. So all these things that I'm working on in the clinics has to do with that. I'm also trying to break down this barrier between me and them. Right? So that they trust me enough to play for me. Right. And I tell them, we're going to leap off the cliff together. I'm not asking you to do it alone. There's a great old saying that says, leap and the net will appear. And I tell them, I'm not asking you to do it by yourself. I'm going to be with you. The whole band is going to be with you. What better situation could there be in your life than to take a chance around so many people who love you and support you?
Yeah, well, that's a tremendous amount of stuff to take away.
It's a lot of stuff. I could yak for days on this stuff, man.
I know.
Yeah.
As could like so many people here, which is why, it's fantastic. Serious about learning jazz or any kind of music, you need to be around other musicians. You need to be sharing ideas because
absolutely.
That's where you're getting your inspiration. That's where you're like, oh, this is a different way to think about this. That's where you're gonna improve, even if it's not just from playing. It's just from hearing and talking to people. And there's so much we could break down in like what you just said. But this way of teaching with chord tones and rhythm, like. For improvisation. I mean, that is so clearly going to get better results for students. And it's curious that when, I'm sure you're finding when you're doing clinics, and when I work with people, that it's almost a foreign concept. It's like people are, in general, it seems like learning jazz improvisation coming from this chord scale thing or this idea that we have to, like the importance is on notes more than rhythm a lot of times. The importance is on, I think it comes from the way things are traditionally taught, but also not understanding, when you're listening, like if you might listen to Jeff Coffin play or Michael Brecker or somebody who plays a lot of stuff, not all the time, but you might interpret that as meaning, oh, for me to sound good, that means I have to play a lot of notes.
Right.
But that is a result of doing the thing like you're talking about and starting there and building on top of that.
Right.
Little
well, here's the thing too, man. People think they're supposed to sound good.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and when you first start playing, we all sound terrible because we don't know what we're doing. We're beginning the process, which is a continuous process all our lives. I'm still in process. I try to make that really clear with my students. I said, look, man, you're in process right now. You're always going to be in process. I'm still in process. Charlie Gabriel at 92 years old is still in process, right? This never ends.
Absolutely. And embracing the beginner.
Embracing the process. Absolutely, man.
Well, embracing the process, but also embracing, especially when you're starting out at whatever it is. instead of feeling like beating yourself up because you're not good at it yet and you're just starting, that's insanity. Embrace the fact that you are at the bottom of this curve. You're never going to improve more and as quickly as when you're starting.
Right.
That's
true.
the most fun time.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of times that's our ego also. But here's the thing too. I think that all music education programs should require that the band director, potential band director, has to learn some improvisation. The classical players in particular, you know, because I mean I've heard directors go 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm like, what? To their jazz bands, clapping on 1 and 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and I'm like, come on, man, like this is awful. And it's through no fault of their own necessarily. It's through the fault of the program that they've come from. And so I've had students at Vanderbilt, I've been teaching there for 10 years. I've had students who are ed majors come to me to learn improvisation before they go out and teach, you know? So I can give them some of the foundation. Because here's the thing, man, if you go to New York and you look up, what do you see?
See some tall buildings.
Some tall buildings, right? So without the foundation, those buildings don't exist. But here's the thing, man, if you are an expert at foundation, you can be Frank Gehry. You know? You can build the craziest stuff you ever see. You can be Gaudi as long as you understand foundation. Because you can build anything upon that. So I'm not trying to produce jazz musicians. I'm trying to produce musicians, regardless of what they decide to play. You know, so I'm trying to get them to reach people, to make them want to move, to make them want to dance. There was a young lady I was talking to earlier who was at our show last night. And she said, man, I just wanted to get up and dance. I said, well, why didn't you? She's like, yeah, you're right. I probably should have. And but my idea is that it's all dance music. Ornette, it's dance music. Train, Louis, you know, the list goes on and on.
Monk would literally dance.
Monk would literally dance, yes. I mean, how much more clear can it be? And yet, like, we try to sit stoically and, you know, intellectualize the music. And I'm like, yo, man, let it move, let it flow through you. And that's what I love so much about the Sax Loft also, is that me, Tia Fuller, and Kirk Whalum, we come from very different backgrounds. We play very different music, but there's so much overlap. And I think the way that we feel music is very similar.
So tell everybody a bit about the Sax Loft in case they're not familiar.
So the Sax Loft, thesaxloft.com is an online subscription-based saxophone-centric education site. And there are 3 levels. It's foundation, elevation, and innovation. And there's 180 videos from us on there with PDFs. And each month we have what we call office hours, and also like a time where you can come in and like be with us when we practice individually. So we'll get on Zoom and people will come on and we'll talk about the things we're working on, how we're working on those things, why we're working on those things, and what we're working on. We take questions, recommend records, and just kind of break down what it is that we're doing. Talking about composition also. So I think it's different than anything else that's out there because you're getting 3 teachers. And it's everything from how to put the horn together to getting into like ultra dominant stuff. Right. And so it's kind of all the things that we think were important or are important, those are all on there.
I think it's something I like to try to encourage people to get different perspectives. You know, in my own journey,
absolutely,
you're going to hear the same. You're going to have the same concept, and 3 different people are going to explain it differently, and they're all right. They can all, you know.
Yeah, it's all valid.
And then you are going to maybe take those 3 and maybe 10 others. And then you're going to come to your understanding that's personal to you.
Yeah.
And the more different perspectives, and sometimes, you know, the more different perspectives, the better, really. And maybe
absolutely
that one I totally disagree with, and that's fine. But it's it's feeding into, you know, how you're informed
your perspective,
opinions.
Yes, and perspectives and opinions. And that's the thing. Like if you find something you disagree with, great. Figure out why. Right? Don't just go, oh, I don't like that. You know, well, figure out why.
And sometimes it evolves to.
Of course it does.
You adopt it as the.
Yeah, I remember. There's a tune by Coltrane called "I'll Wait and Pray." The very end of it does, there's this tonal cluster, this harmonic. And I remember when I was younger, I used to love hearing him play a beautiful ballad, and then I'd be like, man, he ruined it by playing that stuff at the end. But then it became my favorite part.
Right.
You know,
Evolved on you.
yeah, I evolved. I wasn't able to hear it.
Right.
You know, and so I think that those perspectives are very, very important. So when I'm on the road, I'll send subs sometimes for my lessons at Vanderbilt. So Bill Evans lives in Nashville. Joel Fromm was there for a couple of years. I would send those guys, and I'd be like, yo, man, you're going to have Bill Evans as your instructor this week, or you're going to have Joel this week, or you're going to have Mark Douthit, you know, incredible, incredible musicians. And so they get a different perspective based on what these guys are hearing as they play. And I'm like, wow, man, what a great opportunity for them. And I get to put some money in their pockets, which is wonderful. And they're great friends. And I'm like, man, just do your thing. Like, have them play for you and do whatever you want. And so yeah, the perspective of others is really important. And that's why Jen is so important. Also, that's why what you're doing is so important. That's why what we're doing is so important. You get these different perspectives that feed your curiosity and inform your decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're able to take those things and develop them over time, it's like 4 years at a college, man, that's nothing. It's a drop. It seems like a long time, right? But it's a literal drop in the bucket, you know? And so the information that we're giving them, I'm like, look, I don't expect you to assimilate all this while you're here. I'm giving you so much information. I expect you to do the work.
Right.
But the work that you're doing is going to evolve. It's almost like, and I used this example the other day about being in New Orleans and how much I love that city, that I felt like I was in the small end of a funnel, right? And I'm going through, and eventually the funnel goes like this, right? And so I think college is like that. You're at the small end of the funnel. And once you get through into what we call the real world, right? It opens up like this. It will continue to open up. And it continues to go like this if you're open.
Yeah.
You know, if you extended that funnel, it would continue and continue to infinity.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I want to be. And that's how I want my students to be. I don't want them to put on blinders. I don't want them to be myopic about what they listen to. I always try to get them to record and listen to themselves. Sometimes they do, sometimes they. When they do, they're like, "Oh man, it really makes a big difference." I'm like, "Yeah, no kidding. Wonder why I've been asking you to do that all semester." So what I'll do sometimes, like I found a picture of Coltrane in a hotel room with his reel-to-reel, like playing, right? So I just send it to them.
Right.
I don't say anything. Well, on that one I did. I said, if it's good enough for Train, it's good enough for you.
Yeah.
This is him
You don't
recording
have to
himself.
carry a reel-to-reel around.
Well, right. And so another one we were getting. So at the end of the semester, I coach the top small group. I have them come in because I have them write all their own music. I have them come into my studio and we record 3, maybe 4 tunes. And so I was saying, let's try to find a time. It was difficult to find a time. I said, what we could do is, we could track the stuff and put the horns on and blah, blah, blah. And one of my students said, well, if we do it like that, I don't think I want to do it this semester. We should wait. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, you guys work on finding a time and we'll see what happens. So what I did later that day is I sent them a YouTube video of Mike Brecker in the studio recording, overdubbing his solos. Didn't say anything, just sent it to them, And because it's easy to get locked into a perspective, especially when you're good as a young student. And so I have to find a way of breaking them of that kind of, I don't even know exactly what to call it, but it's like a focus. Right. What I'm doing here with my hand, it's like this kind of thing, right? I need to spread that out and go, yes, but there are exceptions. There are ways around this that are very, very effective. Yeah. And so there's give and take in both, but to shift their perspective, to keep them off balance. Yeah. Keep them off balance.
And be ready and open to different ideas.
Yep.
That's one of those things that just comes with getting older, I think, too.
Yeah.
And I guess it's not unfortunate, but it's when you have as much knowledge and experience as you have, and then you want to help younger people, but you also, it's about understanding I mean, when you look back, I'm sure you think of all these things, lessons and things you learned that then you didn't actually understand fully until years later. And then you
Some of them
understood
still
it
understand it.
again, another level 10 years later, and it just
Yeah.
works that way.
Well, I remember a particular example of that. So Jim Riggs was the professor at North Texas when I was there. He was a sax professor. Brilliant guy, amazing educator, beautiful heart, you know, still playing. He's in his mid 80s, still practicing, you know. He hasn't been in the school for a number of years. Brad Lely teaches there now. I was there with him too. And again, a big, beautiful heart. And, but both of them, you know, they're hard asses as teachers, and they need to be, right? You need to prepare the students. And with Riggs, one of the things he would always talk about when we were in big band was transparency of sound. And he would go and he'd be messing with the bass players, Riggs, and he would upset them because he's like messing with their sounds. But I was trying to figure out, like, man, he knows exactly what he's talking about, but he can't explain it, right? And so I thought about this for years, and I finally got it. I understand exactly what he's talking about, and it's the transparency to be able to hear through an ensemble that there's no pollution in each other's space, right? So that the bass occupies, like it's a strata of sound. It's like smell exists in strata. That's why you can teach a dog to smell certain things. You can't mask a smell. They sit on top of each other, right? Just like sound. But if the guitar player and the piano player are playing in the same register, there's noise pollution, right? It gets like this rather than this.
Clarity.
There's no clarity, right? So this is the transparency that he talked about. So this lesson took me probably 15 years to figure out. And I thought about it a lot, but I couldn't quite figure it out until one day I figured it out. It's like listening to Ornette Coleman. I listened to him for a while, and I was like, he's supposed to be really important, and I don't get it at all. And I started working on some different stuff. I started working on some different intervallic things. I was listening to field recordings, a lot of Alan Lomax stuff. There's a great website called folkstreams.net. It has all these beautiful folkloric documentaries. So I was listening to a lot of, like, what I call music of necessity, very earthy, very cultural, it exists in one place kind of thing, indigenous, you might say. And I was driving to a gig, this was early 90s, and I had this Ornette cassette in. I almost drove off the road. Swear to God, man. It was like I'd been living in clouds, and suddenly they parted and the sun came out. And it was one of the most profound moments of my musical world. It was incredible.
And that, I guess you'd attribute that. Well, I mean, you were searching. You were like, there's something in here. I need to find it. And you were open. And we need to be there, you know, not just with Ornette, but with a wide range of things, because that's
and
the
with
only
each other.
way, it's the only way we get to those moments of clarity and transparency.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's shift gears for a second, just quickly before we wrap up, and because I always like to talk about gear.
Oh yeah, me too.
The nerdy saxophone stuff. Hey, you know what I noticed? Okay, so first I have to mention that you know, you're a Jody Jazz artist, and I thank Jody Espina for putting us in touch.
Absolutely,
you know,
love Jody.
and giving me your phone number so that I can
Yep.
get Jeff, let's hook up and do this interview. And I appreciate you taking the time, because I
My
know
pleasure,
you were
man.
like the most busy person in the building, one of them. So I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our viewers appreciate it too, your time.
Thanks, viewers.
Yeah. And I also, and so before we get into the gear, one gear thing I noticed, you have a Peter Jessen ligature on your soprano mouthpiece.
Yep.
Peter is a good friend of mine. I used to work
Oh, really?
I used to work with him at the shop in Copenhagen.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't know
doing
that.
repairs. Yeah.
Ah,
A long time ago
I
now.
love Peter, man.
Yeah.
I met him years ago over there, and we've always stayed in touch and
Yeah.
go and have dinner at his house and hang.
He's
And
a very dear friend. Yeah.
oh, he's great.
And we have a couple projects we're working on, saxophone gear projects that we're working on that are coming soon. So I will be sure to give you the
Right on.
the scoop on those.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm sure
Man, I love his soprano ligature. I've got two of his tenor ligatures, and they're fantastic, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he makes amazing products. Like I remember one of the first times I met him, he was working on the G Mezzo, and he was doing every piece by hand.
Yeah.
And he had a tenor that he made completely by hand too.
Yeah.
And it was heavy, you know, and ergonomically it was different than what I played. But the resonance, I was like, dear God, man.
Yeah.
And got one of his mouthpieces that he made, and I adore him. He's great.
Yeah. Hey, Peter. Hope you're
Hey,
watching.
Peter, what's up?
Okay, and then beyond that, I mean, maybe you want to just talk about the different things you're playing. Now.
Sure. So for Jody stuff, I play it on baritone. I play the DV 8 on Barry. On soprano, I play it's a 7-star dark hard rubber, and those are the two Jody pieces I play, and I love them. The soprano piece is the best soprano piece, hands down, that I've ever played. And I build the bite pads up.
Yeah, we're talking about that.
Yep.
This morning.
So I do a clear, and then I do 2 of the BG thick pads, the black ones.
Yeah.
And so it opens up the aperture a little bit more to give a little more roundness and warmth. And because I like kind of a round feel in my mouth.
Yeah.
And the way the air and the resistance sits for me, I really like. So on tenor, I'm playing my Freddie Gregory, which I've been playing for many years. And on alto, I vacillate between a New York Meyer and a Ted Klum.
Okay.
And all Boston sax reeds,
What horns are you playing?
all Yamaha 82Zs, unlacquered,
Okay.
all of them.
Okay.
Yep.
How long have you been playing? So you're a Yamaha artist as well?
22 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know what I wanted to ask you? It's just popped in my head. I just recently...
Did you all see the twinkle in his eye?
I'm like, oh, good. I've been meaning to ask Jeff this, and then I would feel... Well, I would have just sent you a text or something, but now you can tell everybody. So I've been wanting to get into, like, pedals and stuff, you know. And it's just one of those things. Like, you need to... Like anything else, if you want to sound good, you're going to have to get into it. You're going to have to talk to some people who have some experience, and you have to do some experimentation and work on it. So I'm at the very beginning, which is like, all right, I got myself like a multi-effects unit.
Yep.
So I have an opportunity to pick your brain. Maybe you could talk about like when you're using that stuff, like what you're using, and any tips you'd have.
Sure. So I've been using pedals for a long time. I think my first experience hearing them was on the Brecker Brothers Heavy Metal Bebop record. And Mike was using, I believe it was called a Mutron, which is kind of like wah, wah. It's opening the sound like an envelope filter. And I was out with the Flecktones. We were in Wisconsin, and there was a little shop that Baylor would go to because they had picks. Sometimes he was able to find the picks he liked to use. And so there's this thing called the Qtron that was like sitting out by Electro Harmonics. I said, oh, what's that? They said, oh, it's an envelope filter. And so we talked about it, and they said, you know, just take it for sound check and try it. And it was that sound. I was like, oh, dear God. I've been looking for this forever, right? And on baritone, it's amazing on baritone. It's great on tenor, too. On baritone, it's even better. And so I have a little mini Q from Electro Harmonics. It's like $100.
Yeah.
It's crazy, a little stomp box. But it's literally this big.
Yeah.
From my live gigs, with Dave Matthews, we're using a DPA 4011 mic, which is the best wireless mic that's out there, without question. There's nothing even close. And DPA has 2 mics. The 4011 is the higher of the 2, and it is absolutely astounding. And but when I'm doing my live gigs, because I'm also doing some flute stuff and a bunch of different horns, I use an RE20, which I really love. And so I've got an impedance inverter at the end of that, plug it directly into my POG Electro Harmonics, which is an octave divider. I can octave down or an octave above, and I can roll how much of those I want into each of them. The POG then goes into the Qtron, and then from the Qtron, I go into a reverb unit. I've got a Blue Sky reverb, and I use that only when the board doesn't have its own reverb.
Oh, really?
Yep. Because a lot of times the onboard reverbs will be better than an analog reverb. But I've got it in case I need it.
Right.
And so I put little markings on there as to where I want to be, you know, and I also keep a picture on my phone of my settings. And I also have a Lucky Cat I guess a digital delay. I believe it's digital anyway. But it's a Lucky Cat delay, and which I really like a lot also.
Okay. And so now these are like analog pedals, so you have to
Yep.
be turning the knobs.
Yep.
So you don't have like a lot of different presets. You basically have,
But I did have one of those. I had the Line 6 M9 for a long time,
okay.
and I had a big rack space and had a stomp thing, you know, multi-effects pedal, and those are great to start with because it'll give you some different things to work on. The thing I like about the individual ones is that's what they're built for.
Right.
You know, so the Mini Q sounds like the one that used to be this big, but it takes up 25% of the size. So I have a pedal train pedal board, the smallest one they make, which I think is like 13 inches. And so it comes in a bag. That bag, the pedal board itself can just fit in my backpack.
Right.
So if I'm traveling and I don't have room for the bag, all I've got room for is the pedal board, stick it in the backpack and go.
Right. So would you recommend like start with like a multi-effects unit, like what I've already got, and then kind of find your sound through experimentation?
Yes, get with a guitar player who has a bunch of pedals.
Right.
Plug in a 57 or a 58, get that little impedance inverter, and just plug it into the pedal and go through an amp.
Right.
You know, and have the amp facing you rather than behind you because you don't want to get the feedback.
Right.
And or you can go into a Guitar Center and do the same thing.
Right.
Just plug into their pedals. Just ask for a 58. Just sit there and play through stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but the cool thing about the multi effects is that you can sometimes use some stuff in combination,
Yeah.
which can be really great as well. So you might have an octave divider. You might have a nice plate reverb, and you know, some kind of flange or chorus or Qtron or whatever.
And who's some saxophone players that you would recommend to listen to that have you know, a nice dialed in sound?
Well, Eddie Henderson. Oh God, I'm spacing his name. Freedom Jazz Dance. Eddie Harris.
Eddie Harris.
Yeah, I had the age. I'm like, well, Eddie Harris. I think he was kind of the first guy, and but my friend Skerrick does a lot of amazing stuff. He's like way ahead. He's probably like the ultimate guy for me with that stuff. He's one of my favorite saxophone players. Period. Seamus Blake uses a bunch of pedals. There's a website called Horn
FX.
FX.
Yeah, yeah.
Horn-FX, I think.
Okay, yeah.
.com, and they have a lot of stuff on there. Rashawn is using a lot of pedals. Rashawn Ross on trumpet. Tavon Pennicott is using a bunch of stuff. I think people are finally there.
Right.
You know, it's like, well, why are the guitar players having all the fun?
Exactly.
You know, so I think it's just a matter of exploring this stuff. Sorry, my alarm is telling me that I have a presentation coming up in 45 minutes.
Nice.
And but I think that, you know, one of the things you have to think about when you're getting a pedal is how does it track, right? So meaning that if I'm playing a fast line, is it lagging behind me, or is it on me like a noonday shadow? You know, it's right on top of me. And so the pedals that I use, they track really well. And some of them have latency, and I can't have latency if I'm trying to play my lines.
Of course.
You know, and then you just explore and experiment as to where they sound good, and sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it won't.
Right.
And there's a microphone also,
Intramic.
yeah, that's really great for using pedals. Now I use too many horns a night
Yeah.
to really use the Intramic, and but it's great if you're playing one horn. That's the jam, and it sounds great.
Yeah.
It sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I have one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did a video on it, and that was part of the thing. I'm like, oh, now that I have this, Because he was Ben Wendell, who also uses.
Ben Wendell used a bunch too.
And he
Yep.
hipped me to the
Paul
HMI,
Hansen too.
And he was like, "Oh yeah, I got this because now I can use my pedals. And
Right.
it solves all those problems." You know?
And so on flute, Tomasi Flutes has put out a thing called Micro Cork, which I used last night. You just is a piezo. They replace the crown
Yeah.
and the cork, and it plugs in, and there's no bleed.
Yeah, I was checking that out at the booth.
It's so great, man.
Yeah.
It is so great.
I'm gonna have to get one of those too.
It's awesome.
Not that I play flute very much.
Yeah,
anymore.
but if you're playing it live anywhere,
Yeah.
you don't have to be up on a microphone, and
Yeah.
like I touch the mic with my nose to make sure that I know where I am.
Mm.
But this thing is a godsend, man.
Wow.
It's the best.
Man.
Micro Cork.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna. Yeah, it's another thing.
Mhm.
I'll have to check out. Make a video on maybe. Man, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
I'm gonna leave
My
it there,
pleasure. Thank you.
because that was already so much fantastic information. As like you said, I'm sure you could just go on and on. We'll have to do another one next time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cover everything we
Let's
didn't
do it.
get to.
Yeah.
Man, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank
All
you.
right.